Hey guys, welcome back to the Champagne Room. How you doing? I feel like you guys have come back here thinking it's story time. It's not. I've decided to just put stories time on hold for a little bit so we can have some pressing conversations. And let me just also say, if there's anything you feel that you would love me to touch on, please comment below. And if it's a topic that I feel I would be able to do some justice to, or actually explore and talk about, I'll definitely go back and do it. I just feel like we've just got to talk about some things. So today's topic, as said in the title, is, or at least one of the things they don't tell you about grief. And before I get into it, I just want to just take a moment to say to anybody right now who is going through the pain of loss, who is in a space of anxiety, depression, fear, desperation, just is a mess. They feel like they're a mess and they're unraveling. I want to start off by saying, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I'm so sorry you're going through it. I know all about it. I've been there. It's not easy. It's absolutely not easy. I've been there before. It's not easy. It's not nice. It's hard. So I am sorry. I'm genuinely sorry. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It's not a good place to be in. But there is the other side. And when I talk about the other side, what I'm referring to is you're not going to always feel this way. It is going to get better. Please understand, it is going to get better. You've just got to make certain choices, and I'll get into that. But it is going to get better. Please don't allow other people's grief stories to make you feel like I'm always going to be depressed. That doesn't have to be your story. It really doesn't. I thought it did. It doesn't. I'm actually, a friend of mine lost a parent before I lost my dad. And her grief story was so traumatic and painful. And when I looked at her, I was so scared when my dad passed away, because I'm like, is this what's going to happen to me? Because I could see the pain all over her face, the discomfort, the fear, anxiety, the depression. And I was almost like anticipating that I was about to go through that. And I can honestly say that my journey has been so different. It has been so different. So please don't allow other people's grief to be your story. And that's not to say the other person's grief is wrong or it's bad. No, I'm just saying everybody's story is different. That's really what it is. So I don't want to draw it out, because there's no need to draw this out. I'm just going to get right into it. The thing people don't tell you about grief is that you cannot run from the pain. And I get it. I don't even know what I would have said to a therapist who was like, listen, you're about to go through a lot of pain and there's nothing you can do about it. No, but why would you say that? Why would you say it? But as somebody who's been through it and has watched other people around me go through it, you cannot run from the pain. You will and you must feel it. Why? Because it's a natural part of life. You cannot run from the pain. You can't. You can't. And maybe that's not easy to say or hear, but you can't. After my dad passed away, my goodness, I remember the day like it was yesterday. And it was, this year will be 3 years. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I was unraveling. And there was a lot going through my mind. I just couldn't wrap my mind around what happened. At that point, I was feeling desperate. I was feeling lost. I was scared. I was traumatized. Even in one of my videos, I actually spoke about it, how at some point I started to bargain with God. I was literally like, God, if you can somehow undo this and he can wake up, I won't tell. I won't tell anybody. If you can somehow FBI zap people and make them forget, and I be the only one to remember that he had passed away, I would never share our secret. I was bargaining. because it was just so traumatic, and it was just very bad. And so after he passed away, I went through this phase of watching a lot of videos and reading a lot of information about grief and, you know, how to deal with it, the feelings, because there were a lot of things that were happening to me that I kept on feeling like, is this normal? Is this normal? Is this normal? And nobody around, or except for that person, nobody around me, my very close friends, had never experienced this before, the trauma of losing a loved one who was so close. And so I was really just going through it alone. And one of the articles that I came across really touched me, and it really opened me up and made me understand this reality, which is that you are going to feel the pain, was a lady, an American woman who had lost a loved one, who had experienced loss, and she was talking about grief. And she used the analogy of grief is like this tidal wave. It is this big wave of emotion. And instead of turning, or what she's learned is, instead of turning your back to it and trying to run, she's learned how to almost get on her knees and almost submit to it and allow this wave to kind of pass over her. To allow this wave to pass over her, because she knows the pain is inevitable, it's coming. And so she's learned how to not run, but to accept this thing is going to happen. Let it pass over. And, you know, the more I read the article, I realized she wasn't saying submit to the wave as in allow it to, you know, like when you surfers, when they are surfing and they fall off their boards and now they're caught in the undercurrent and everything is just so hectic and violent and vicious and they never come up. No, she's not saying allow it to take you where now you're underwater and everything is violent and vicious and your head is being bashed around, you know, against rocks. Obviously, I'm still going along with the analogy. No, she's saying accept what's going to happen. And just like with surfers, now that I bring it up, they know that at some point the wave is going to pass you over and you're going to be able to pop right back up. And so allow it to just pass you over or pass over you. And, you know, when she was saying it, I completely understood it. But submitting to that reality was very, very, very tough. As I'm sure it feels right now as you are the one going through the grief, through loss. It's tough. It's tough to just accept this pain because it's painful. I always say to people, there is nothing can prepare you for the feeling. Nothing. And even somebody who can sympathize because they've been through it as well still doesn't know how you're feeling, because our pain is very different and we react to it very differently. But you have to understand that the pain is going to be there and you can't run away from it. There was something specific I wrote here that I wanted to address. You know, when my dad passed away, can't find it, so I'm just going to now go for it. When my dad passed away, I tried to run away from the pain. I really, really did. And I don't know if I've shared this with you guys, but, you know, he had always said to me, you know, I think you would actually be really good in the fashion space. And it was something that I was like, yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for the encouragement. But And, you know, before he passed away, I had been really working on Naraya. I had just designed this amazing collection of underwear that ended up being pretty popular. I designed this amazing underwear and I did a photo shoot for it, and I didn't say anything to my dad. I wanted to surprise him and say, here, Dad, I did it. I did it. And unfortunately, I was away at a workshop, or it was like a content session for Unilever, and the day I flew back from Durban and I was getting ready to tell him was the day he passed away. As soon as I landed, I got the phone call, he's collapsed, and I never got to tell him and share this big surprise. But everything after that was just a whirlwind, because we buried him on the 3rd of August. By the end of August, I launched my clothing line, Naraya. And because I saw how excited people were and how many orders were coming through, I kicked into work mode. Now I was fighting to keep this business alive and growing. And I was just like, yes, orders, let's take them. And I went for it. And then, of course, by that December, I was like, I'm going on vacation, went on vacation. Everything just felt like I was not quite focusing on what had happened. And I wasn't. I really wasn't focusing on what happened. And I remember there was a moment where I was like, this isn't as bad. I mean, I love my dad. Lord knows. You guys, anybody who knows me personally knows I had a uniquely close relationship with my dad. But I just, at that moment, I kind of started to feel a bit comfortable. Like, this isn't as bad as I thought it would be. I think I'm handling it quite well. Boom. Came January the following year. I went to Benmore Gardens one day. Went to Benmore Gardens. Now, when I left my house, I was already feeling a bit awkward. I was already feeling a bit anxious. I was feeling a bit sad, but I was like, oh, whatever. I need to go to the shop and buy some things. And so I left. I went to Benmore. And as soon as I got to the mall, this feeling started to really increase. And now, because I've been somebody who's had or suffered from anxiety issues, I already knew that this was anxiety, but I'd never experienced it on this level. Got out of my car, parked at a certain level, got into the elevator. As soon as those elevator doors shut, for some reason, and I've never experienced this before and never since then haven't, I just felt so claustrophobic and I started to shake. And I was literally watching, and I was in the lift with other people, and I don't know if they noticed that something was going on, but I was shaking. And as soon as those doors opened, I was standing towards the back of the lift. Guys, I didn't let anybody exit before I did. I pushed them like out of the way, like parting the red. I pushed them and I walked through, type of thing. Pushed them out of the way and I got out. But what I noticed was nobody was like, excuse me. I actually, when I think about it, I think that they must have seen that something was not quite right. I pushed them out of the way and I started to walk towards, I was trying to walk towards the shop I wanted to, and I was trying to distract myself like, this can't happen, this can't happen, can't happen. To cut a long story short, I ended up going to a corner in the mall. There's steps somewhere and I collapsed on the steps and I sat there and I waited and I waited and I waited. And I don't know how else to say this, but I collapsed in a way that it looked like I was perhaps just sitting there, because nobody stopped to say, hey, is anything going on? And I think my facial expression, or maybe I was just looking calm, but I wasn't. And eventually I called my mom crying and I was like, you have to come and fetch me. My legs are not moving, because that's what it felt like. I literally at that point started to even feel like, no, I'm having a stroke. I was so scared. And after that incident, I went back to work. Barely stopped, barely took any time out, went back to work. And again, a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months after that, I was here in my home. My seamstress was here. We were talking about this piece of clothing, this, and this. This is what I want to change. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. Let me go to the kitchen quickly, get myself water, and then I'm going to try on the dress. As I came out of the kitchen, my legs literally, I collapsed. I collapsed. My legs were rubber. I collapsed. I could barely feel them. And again, I thought something terrible was happening. I called my mom, who was all the way in Pretoria. Imagine, this is what the anxiety did to me. I called my mom, who was all the way in Pretoria, to come and fetch me in Sandton to take me to the doctor. When she was like, just try and calm down. Can't you go to the doctor? I was like, no, I'm too scared to even go to the doctor alone. And so she came home to fetch me. Why am I telling you all of this? Because the grief will, let me say that again. You have to feel the pain. You have to go through the grief process. You can't escape it. You can't. You can't escape it. Another thing that I want to say, which again might not be easy to hear, but I think it's important to say. There is a time, or rather there is a season for grief and mourning, and then you have to move on. And that's not me trying to be insensitive. Again, I've lost somebody, so I know how it feels, but I also know what I'm saying. There's a time for grief, and then you have to move on. And moving on does not signify the fact that you've forgotten them, or you no longer love them, or, you know, it's for you. I had to make peace with the fact that Ubab Shabalala is resting. He's resting. While I'm having all of these I almost said collapse sessions, but that's just, no, I can't say that. But while I was collapsing and having sleepless nights and this, that, and the other, he's resting. And if there's one thing I still know about him, is he wouldn't have wanted that to be my life. Excuse me. He wouldn't have wanted that to be my life. And so I knew I had to move on. And so what I did was I sought help. I went to get help. I I went to counseling, and then I decided, you know what, I think this is best dealt with within the church. And I was right. The church is what helped me. Healing through Christ, that's what helped me. Going to church, enrolling in certain programs and workshops. And that's really what started to give me peace. Prayer and fasting, that's what started to give me peace. So moving on does not signify that this person was insignificant, or that you don't love them anymore, or that you don't remember them, or you don't care, or it's not that serious. No, Lord knows that's not the truth. It's that you have to move on for yourself. You know, when we're in hospital, the day my dad passed away, I don't know, well, I know they always do this, but I don't know what the room is called, where, you know, when, you know, obviously they've taken you into that emergency room where now they're working on you and trying to resuscitate you, and then they kind of call the family to a private room because they know it's about to get very real. When we were sitting in that room, I remember I'd been crying so much my vision was blurry, but I still remember I looked up at my mom, not able to see her properly, and I said to her, I can't see past this moment. And she said to me, you don't need to. And I held on to that because she was right. I didn't need to see past that moment. In fact, I didn't need to do anything. I couldn't see my life after my dad, but my life could see me, if that makes sense. If destiny was a person, destiny would have been waiting for me. In other words, how I felt in that moment and not being able to see what was going to happen to me afterwards was actually irrelevant, because things were going to happen to me afterwards. Here I am 3 years down the line, still living, still breathing, still doing things that I love, still being. And in that moment, I couldn't see that. I want to remind you guys that your life doesn't have to stay there. It really doesn't. It's okay to move on. It's important to move on. It is okay to move on. They've fulfilled their days, and you have to as well.